Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from Stormont in Belfast, the home of the reconvened Northern Irish Assembly. 100 years ago, the early leaders of this province declared it a Protestant parliament for a Protestant state. Things are very different now, and it seems the nationalist community are heading towards ascendancy. But how do you reconcile communities to face the future? We speak today to two leading campaigners about how both communities, nationalist and unionist, can face the future together. Alasdair McDonnell, former leader of the Social Democratic and Labour Party, welcome back to the Alex Salmond Show. Delighted to be back, Alec, and delighted to see you again. Now, thinking from your perspective, a long leader campaigning constitutional nationalist in Northern Ireland, you must be pretty pleased with the way things are going. I mean, the Assembly's back up and running in the north. After the results of the elections in the Republic, then a unification prospect is on the, if not immediate agenda, certainly on the medium-term agenda. And it's now looking like there's not going to be the threat of a border on land. There's going to be one on the Irish Sea following Brexit. So that sounds pretty good from a constitutional nationalist point of view. That is a very positive description, Alec, but the reality is something short of that. I'm very glad to see the Assembly back up again and working. And people are happy that that has happened. I'm not saying they're overconfident because they basically want to see product. People want to see outcomes that improve lives. And we have a few months to go before we start producing political output, political product. The whole situation needs to be handled sensitively and handled in a gentle way, because it would take very little to provoke paramilitaries. And there are rumps of the various paramilitary groups just waiting out there for an excuse to get active again. So any movement towards a new Ireland, an agreed Ireland, a united Ireland, will all have to be done gently and by negotiation rather than by coercion. Let's look first, before we turn to constitutional politics and what needs to be done to promote reconciliation, let's look at what we might call bread and butter politics. Yeah. Would it be true to say that the resumption of the Assembly in Stormont and the debate and indeed the results of the Republic election had a common theme in that people were very concerned about bread and butter issues? They wanted something done about the health service in Northern Ireland. They wanted something done about housing in the Republic. Did they overshadow the constitutional debate? It had an influence. I'm not sure how much it overshadowed. It certainly had a big influence. The issues in the South were very clearly housing, because there was a housing problem. The economy crashed 10 years ago. The construction industry crashed. Nobody was building houses. And it was all right because a lot of the immigrants went home to Eastern Europe or wherever. But suddenly the economy started picking up, and the immigrants started coming back. There were jobs, there were lots of jobs in Dublin and the greater Dublin area, and there was no housing. And that put great pressure on. And the whole thing was crystallised when Dublin City Council sent a digger or a bulldozer out to basically remove what they thought was debris on the banks of a canal. And they moved a poor individual. There was a man sleeping inside it, and that caused consternation and caused a terrible reaction and set the housing or the homelessness agenda at the top of the list. But yes, there are bread and butter issues there, but really what's happening here, and indeed what's happened on a grand scale in the South, was a reaction to the rump of austerity. Austerity is still biting, and there are still, while the economy has recovered in Dublin, it has recovered. Hopes have risen for the middle classes, but hopes have not risen much for the working classes or those that are at the bottom end of the economic scale. I noticed in the government appointments that the Health Service Ministry has been handed to an official unionist, as it used to be called, a UUP politician by the Democratic Unionists and Sinn Féin and the other parties. Is that handing something a poison chalice? Well, basically, health has always been seen as a poison chalice. Brian Cowen, the former Irish Prime Minister, referred to it as Angola. It was the equivalent of going into Angola because you couldn't come out intact. And was this the health service in the South or the North or both? The health service in the South, but health service generally, he felt was a no-win situation. The big main parties played Russian roulette and avoided
health because they're afraid of health, they're scared of health. And really, health, there are solutions to the health problem, but it requires somebody hands-on rather than remote control. And Robin Swan, the former Ulster Unionist leader, is the health minister, and I think he has already shown himself to be hands-on and got to grips with a number of aspects of it. And I'm confident that he'll achieve quite a bit.
Now, turning to the Constitution, would your analysis be that after a long period of time, for a whole variety of reasons, mainstream politicians in the Republic weren't really seeing Irish unity or a border poll as any immediate priority, but now following the elections, it's now much closer as a prospect, as an ambition for the parties in the south of Ireland?
Well, the point is, a lot of us signed up to the current situation with improvements, which was the Good Friday Agreement, where we signed up to the current status, but with fair play and economic justice and etc., equality effectively built in. The membership of the European Union gave us a platform where there was something in it for everybody. You were allowed to be British or Irish or both. Everybody had a comforting zone as a result of the European Union. As a result of Brexit and the British Brexit, basically that has destabilised and scared everybody. And we're now in a situation where unionism feels threatened by talk of a border poll and by talk of a united Ireland, and basically nationalism feels threatened that the gains of the Good Friday Agreement and the advances of that the last 20 years will be taken off us. So really, a lot of people here are in a position where they no longer trust, and I'm talking particularly about thinking unionists, feel that they can no longer trust the British government. Some of the rest of us never quite did, but they are now saying, can we rely on Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party that has betrayed us yet again to stay with us in the future?
So what you're saying is we're in a quite remarkable situation where both parts, if I could call it the community divide, the traditional community divide, fear for the future.
Yeah.
The constitutional nationalist community, the people who wanted to see a united Ireland at some point, are worried that Brexit might destabilise what had been agreed on Good Friday and had followed on from that. But the unionist community, having been sold out on the issue of the border, now think we might get sold out in total.
Yeah, and I think that's the big challenge for people like me and those who want to see a new Ireland, an agreed Ireland emerging, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We have to create the space for conversations. The political parties have almost got to the stage over the last 20 years where they're in their silos and they're almost unable to talk. That has been the great tragedy of Northern Ireland, is that people saw the other as an enemy who was going to do them down. Unionism saw nationalism as an enemy that was going to rise up, and in many ways the Provisional IRA fulfilled that fear. And equally, nationalism saw unionism as the establishment or the overlord that was going to keep them down and suppress them at all costs. What we have got to do now is create space in the middle for people of goodwill to work together and talk together.
And is there a third tribe emerging, perhaps particularly among young people who don't really care about too much about the alignments of the past?
Well, there is a third tribe and maybe a fourth tribe, because we have immigrants here and we have people who are neither nationalist nor unionist. But the young people, increasingly today, no longer, very few of them under 40, remember the Troubles and remember what was involved, and they're looking for a life, and they're looking for a future, and they're looking for space where they can fulfil themselves.
I seem to remember an apocryphal story of a member of the Sikh community in Glasgow once being asked if he was an orange Sikh or a green Sikh.
Yeah.
Isn't the answer to that old apocryphal tale, I don't care?
I don't care, yeah. But the young people are trying to assert themselves. They're not very good at voting. They're not very good at organising themselves in a structured fashion. And I think that's the big challenge for the political parties, is to provide meaningful outlet and space for people. And I mean, one of the things I think would radically change our politics here would be votes at 16.
And if 16-year-olds did get the right to vote, would that change the complexion of Stormont?
Well, I think it would waken up the political parties, and I think that would make them a lot more sensitive to the future. Basically, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, indeed anything up to 30-year-olds are trying to build a future for themselves, trying to build a life, and they're full of hope and full of aspirations to do better. And if they had the vote, certainly there would be a difficulty getting them all to vote, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that would happen, but there would be a sizable slice of them vote, and in turn the politicians would have to respond to that. And to my mind, it would make the political parties more sensitive to futuristic issues and more sensitive to the economic issues.
I'm told the young people you believe are positive about the future. How about yourself, Alasdair? I mean, nobody's more experienced as a practitioner and an observer of Northern Irish politics over the last generation. So where does your feelings lie? Towards the positive side, or are you fearful of the future?
No, I am always hopeful and positive because quite simply I have seen massive transformation in my lifetime, and that is moving forward steadily. The difficulty about it is that with the divide in our society and the tribalism, if you like, that any gain towards equality or fairness can be seen by unionism as a retreat. I don't see it. I see it as a win-win for everybody. A healthy, positive society works better economically, works better in every way. And but that's been the difficulty. Gains, movement towards fair play, movement towards greater levels of equality in our society have been viewed by large elements in unionism as a loss. And I don't subscribe to a zero-sum politics of that somebody has to lose for somebody to win. I think there's all sorts of opportunities, win-win opportunities in our society. We have tremendous potential economically that we never fully realise. And, you know, that all feeds back to the young people who are looking for a life and a livelihood.
Well, let's hope so. Alasdair McDonnell, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Alec, and always good to see you.
Thank you. John Sheridan was one of the leaders of border communities against Brexit. They didn't stop Brexit, but they did stop a border in the island of Ireland. Join me after the break to see what he's got to say. Welcome back. I'm speaking to John Sheridan, one of the leaders of border communities against Brexit. Let's hear his thinking on the future of the island of Ireland. Now, John Sheridan, the last time we spoke, about a year ago, the campaign which you've been associated, Border Communities Against Brexit, we're looking at the very real prospect of some sort of land border in the island of Ireland between north and south. Now that threat has receded, the borders to be in the Irish Sea, so you and your fellow campaigners will be celebrating, will you not?
We didn't celebrate, actually, Alex. We still protested against Brexit. We would feel that it's time to be even more vigilant now. Certainly, we're pleased that the border in the sea, which was already there, will still dictate as to how things come into the north. There's still a long, long way to go because no one knows the fine detail. There's a protocol in the withdrawal agreement. Boris has made that agreement that there will be a border in the sea and there never will be a border on the island. We hope he lives up to that. It would completely undermine the United Kingdom and its negotiations any further if he did renege on it. But there's a committee now has to be set up to see exactly how that border on the sea will work, what product can come in or not come in, and whether there'll be tariffs on that product or not, or even for a product leaving Northern Ireland, will that have to fill in forms or will there be any code applied to it? We presume because of unfettered means unshackled to us. And as far as we were concerned all the time, anything produced in Northern Ireland could go straight into either the United Kingdom or Europe.
So commitments have been given.
Commitments have been given.
But do you trust the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, or do you think you might end up feeling like the Democratic Unionist Party, that you might be stabbed in the back.
Boris is inclined to go on, make his own deals, and get everybody else to tidy up and stroke the T's and dot the I's after it, and he thinks that all is easy. It's not easy, it's a bit of a haywire. But anyway, there's supposed to be a committee set up to scrutinise and see how that border will or will not work. And of course, it's very hard for that committee to make any deliberations until we get the next 9 months over us and see how the UK get on with their trade talks with the EU, which haven't started off very well.
One of the effects of Brexit, perhaps unexpectedly, or certainly of the election, the Christmas election, is the Assembly is reconvened in Belfast, in Stormont. Do you think that in itself has consolidated the peace process? Does that, is it almost people are given a message from the electorate at Christmas that they expected the politicians to do the business, and they seem to have taken heed of that and have got back together?
Well, peace belongs to everybody, and it particularly belongs to the community that had the troubles, and that's Northern Ireland. So one would hope that Stormont should be able and mature enough to work together. I would hope that Stormont will put a lot of the past behind them and look responsibly to the people who put them there and look after their livelihoods. We're not the size of Yorkshire. We've only got a very, very small population, and we need to have an open, honest and frank dialogue, consistent dialogue. I feel, and I'm sure border communities against Brexit would say the same thing, constantly with the Southern government, because we still have to get 37% of our milk down to Southern processors. We still have to get 50% of our lamb. We still have to agree how we share the one environment that we share. We still have to try and get equivalence along the way. We get 330 million here into Northern Ireland to support farming. Farming only made, that's around 290 million. That's all farming made, so farming is completely dependent on those monies coming in, and they are promised to us for the next year. Now the system, they say, is going to change. If that system changed, will it be at loggerheads with the system of agriculture in Southern Ireland, in Europe? And that's the thing that we need to keep an eye on. And
is there something, John, that the politicians could learn from the community campaign of the border communities? Is there aspects of the campaign that might have a wider lesson of people working to a common objective?
Absolutely. I've often said, and border communities certainly, if you live along the border and in border communities, you learn to live, to work together with your neighbour. Your neighbour is your neighbour. You cannot choose he or her or him or whatever. You work along with them because you always need your neighbour, Alex. And Stormont are going to have to learn, I think, a little bit more to get on with their neighbour and work together. Because working together, you can always do something better than working apart.
So if there is to be progress, further consolidation of the peace process, if the uncertainties are to be faced and resolved, uncertainties for the nationalist community, the unionist community, is it a matter of Northern Ireland finding its way forward first and then presenting it to Dublin or to London or to whoever?
That would be ultimately, that would be the thing to do. Put the bones of what an agreed formula, what they want, and have it sorted out on their own desk first, and then bring that through the channels that will be that are to be set up, and say this is the way we see it, this is the way we want it to work, and we feel everybody buys into this. And obviously that makes it easy then for everybody else to try and say, well, let's work towards that. That's what we'd be hoping for. Whether we get that or not is another thing, but look, I think most people on the street would say that to have a foot in each camp, to have a foot in the United Kingdom and a foot in the European Union, has to give Northern Ireland the best chance it ever had. And instead of this running to Westminster and complaining all the time that you haven't got a big enough stipend when you're getting already 11 billion into 1.5 billion people, if we could stand on our own 2 feet and make our own economy in conjunction with Europe and still working with the United Kingdom, what's to be wrong with that? Why could it not be the new, well, maybe I shouldn't say Hong Kong at the minute, but why should it not be a hub in the world where it could pull in investment? And I've heard somebody already knock that by saying, oh yeah, well, how do you bring in investment if it's going to be knocked in 4 years, because it could be a plebiscite in 4 years and you could decide that you don't want anything to do with it and you want to be completely joined at the hip to the United Kingdom. I think that most businesses would be happy to take the opportunity to be able to trade in both worlds. But they themselves, I would say, will wait until they see what happens with these trade negotiations.
And is there a space for the politicians of Stormont to be thinking out the box, to have that sort of dialogue, or are they really in a position when they come out to speak to the public that still address their own section of the community?
No, I would hope that they realise now with the actions that Boris has already taken, the decisions and the way he makes his decisions, with the majority that he has in Westminster, any Westminster voice that comes from Northern Ireland is not going to make any difference in Westminster. So the difference is going to have to be made on this island with the devolved government and presumably in conjunction with the Dublin government. So there is no real other way to progress with speed and doing it in a way that suits the country and the people living in this country better than doing something here and working from here. So I think that they've got the message that they have to build together. And I think they've been sent a message also to sit down and work together and build together. Because at the end of the day, their sovereignty is still intact if they wish. And there's nobody arguing with them as to how they get on with their economic progress in both the United Kingdom and the EU.
Was there a similarity in some ways between the message sent by people in Northern Ireland to the parties in December, basically get back to work and do something about the health service, and the message that seemed to be sent in the Republic election this February, where they said, look, who's going to do something about the housing crisis? That people were looking for politicians to take practical action on day-to-day issues.
Without a doubt, it's been hailed as the biggest change in 100 years. A lot of people have certainly a disposable income, but they're working hard for it. They're travelling 2 hours to their work. They're paying sometimes for their own health care. They're also paying for children's care while they work. The regions throughout Southern Ireland already, Europe has said that the Western region is actually still coming up and still is disadvantaged. So a lot of people are being left out of that new Celtic tiger. And when you see even the rise in social democrats and people for profit, there's a bigger vote coming from the left. I think the public were they felt patronised from the language of both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael as to that they wouldn't speak to one particular party, Sinn Féin, that they wouldn't go back into government together. And these two parties have been in government in and out themselves for the last 100 years, and for the last 5 or 6 years were working coalition, you may as well say. So I think they completely misread it. Certainly it hasn't been easy for the last 5 or 6 years to get the country back on its feet, but you've got to bring everybody with you, and they missed it a lot on those issues, and they were inclined to dictate to the voters, and you can't dictate to voters. Every man's entitled to his own vote and to place it how he feels, and they're still doing it.
So, John Sheridan, you've spelt out there are many imponderables, many practicalities, many commitments have been made and they have to be redeemed. But if it were possible for the politicians in Stormont, instead of waiting for London, waiting for Godot, or for that matter, waiting for Dublin, to have a proposal that can be taken to Dublin, to London, a Northern Irish proposal of what this community needs in terms of its relationships with the Republic and this island, in terms of its relationship with the rest of Europe. And it could be said that that would not just protect the precious peace, but also would enhance the welfare of the people. That would be something that would galvanise a lot of support, would it not?
Yeah, and let's hope that that wouldn't be utopia. I would hope that the people would embrace that and move forward, because it's not even that it'll protect that, but it'll protect not even the health and the welfare, but there has been a problem, and it's proven in Northern Ireland there's a mental health problem there, and that's because of austerity, it's because of sectarianism, it's because of the troubles that have been. And I think that the inhabitants of Northern Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland, they deserve the gift of being able to live unburdened by all those things that I'm after mentioning, and walk freely and work freely and work towards a progressive future, a better future. And, you know, you mentioned health, you know, economics, good progressive economics are one of the best things you can do for a healthy community.
John Sheridan, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Alec. Okay.
In this series in Northern Ireland, we've heard how Brexit has caused uncertainties to both political communities, unionists and nationalists. For unionists, it presents a border in the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. For nationalists, it still threatens to remove the European Union guarantee to the 20-year-old peace process. Uncertainty for both nationalists and unionists. However, the peace process holds. The Assembly is reconvened. And perhaps the key to the future lies in all communities in Northern Ireland agreeing their own pathway to the future and then presenting it to Dublin, to London, to wherever. Perhaps that's the best hope of a bright future for Northern Ireland. And now for Taz and myself and the rest of the crew, it's goodbye for now.